Now I am very delighted to introduce our plenary speaker for this luncheon. Dr. Tina Seeling is from Stanford University, where she is the executive director of the Stanford Technology Venture Program. It's an entrepreneurship over at Stanford, and personally, I had the opportunity to hear her speak about 3 years ago. I was over on campus for Parents' Weekend, and I had my mom and one of my aunts with me, and the reason I'm telling you this is because of what my mom and my aunt told me after they heard her speak, and they just went, wow. I actually understood her, and that was really great stuff. So there were a lot of parents in the auditorium, so I don't think I ever told you that, but even the parents were impressed. Dr. Seeling is the director of the $10 million Center on Entrepreneurship, Undergraduate Entrepreneurship Education, that's co-funded by my division and the Division of Undergraduate Education. So she's now the executive director. Tom Byers is also in the audience, and what's your title in the center? Yeah. He's responsible for the grant. Dr. Seeling actually earned her PhD in neuroscience from the Stanford Medical School, and you've been working with engineers for quite a number of years. I thought this was terrific. She won the Gordon Prize from the National Academy of Engineering in 2009.
Along with Tom.
Along with Tom, okay.
We split it, right?
But this is a very important recognition for their excellence in engineering education and teaching. She has written a number of books, and I think you'll learn a little bit about it. I think she's got another one coming out soon,
Please
or maybe it
no.
is. But I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Seeling. I think you're in for a real treat.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa. It's great, really great. Thank you. Okay, let's see if we can wake up this computer. Great, and turn on this clicker. Great. What an enormous honor it is for me to be here, and I also want to recognize Tom Byers, my wonderful colleague and one of the PIs on the Epicenter project. This is an incredible collection of people. I mean, you guys are doing fascinating things. I loved hearing the presentation earlier about some of the projects, and it sort of took me back to my days in the lab, and I might have to go escape and go back and do some experiments again. At the Epicenter. Now, the Epicenter is called the Epicenter because the full name is the National Center for Engineering Pathways to Innovation. So EPI, Engineering Pathways to Innovation Center, the Epicenter. And our mission is to infuse engineering students, undergrads, across the entire country with the skills, the knowledge, the attitudes necessary to come up with really bold ideas and then bring them to life. I mean, we want them to be really skilled innovators and entrepreneurs. And the wonderful thing is this is really baked into our DNA. We have been doing this I've been doing it for 13 years. Tom's been doing that for many years before I have. And so this is something we've thought about day in and day out. And so by getting this grant, we're doing 3 things. We're sharing with the world the things that we're doing. We're also finding out what all the people across the country are doing in their programs and helping to scale those up. And we're also developing a whole bunch of new initiatives. And so you can help us by allowing us to help you. We know that you have a mission and you have a responsibility to infuse innovation and entrepreneurship into the programs that you're running, the ERC centers. Well, this is our job. So I'm going to basically tell you about the way that I think about innovation and entrepreneurship after my 12, 13 years of doing this, and then tell you about how you can get involved, because we have ways that you can tomorrow start implementing the things that we've been working on. Okay, you ready for that? Super. So for the last dozen years, I've been teaching classes on creativity and innovation. And I wrote this book. It's actually called Ingenious. It just came out a few months ago, which captures everything I know about creativity. And when I went through the first draft of the book, I realized I was looking at everything wrong. I don't think I had ruined all the students, but I realized I was looking at things too narrowly. And I stepped back And I realized one of the reasons why the way we teach creativity doesn't often stick is because we don't look at the big picture. That we need to open the aperture and look at creativity in a much broader sense. And so I created this model which I call the innovation engine. And what I'm going to do over the next 20 minutes is take it apart and put it back together. And I hope and I trust that it will be very memorable because it actually all makes sense. And I want you to notice one thing before I start taking it apart is that this innovation engine has two parts. The inside is an individual, the individual's attitude, knowledge, and imagination, and the outside, which is the outside environment in which they're in, the culture, the resources, and the habitat. Make sense? Okay, and I'm going to start where most people start. Where do you think most people would start when they're thinking about creativity? Which one of these places? Imagination, right? That's where we think creativity, imagination. So let's go there, okay? So imagination. Now the wonderful thing is we all know that kids when they're little, all of us when we were little, were really imaginative. What happened? We went to school, okay? And we went to school and we got problems like this, 5 plus 5. So what is the sum of 5 plus 5? Oh, what base? Okay, well, let's just, base 10, okay? What is the answer to this? 10, okay? So the fact is, we all know this, and we all sort of giggle, because there's one right answer to this problem. But the fact is, if we only give students this type of problem to solve, where there is one right answer, all they're going to be able to do is to solve problems that have already been well-defined with one right answer. But we can teach the same concepts, the same mathematical concepts, by asking this question differently. You want to see? How about this? What two numbers add up to 10? How many answers are there to this? 10? A lot. 10? A lot? Come on, help me out here. How many? Infinite. Okay, repeat after me. Infinite, okay? There are an infinite number of solutions. When you look at negative numbers, you look at fractions. This is interesting. And when I thought of this problem, that's when I knew I had a book. Because I realized we asked the questions the wrong way, and one of the key things we need to do if we want people to be more innovative is to think about the questions we ask. In fact, Albert Einstein is quoted as saying that if he was given a daunting problem to solve, had 1 hour to solve it, and his life depended upon it, he would spend the first 55 minutes framing the problem. Because once the problem was framed correctly, the answer would become obvious. This is incredibly important. Think about the Copernican revolution, right? By reframing the way Copernicus looked at the solar system, instead of saying the Earth was in the center, but the sun was in the center, it opened up the entire field of astronomy. Does that make sense? So one of the key ways to increase creativity and innovation in our students and in ourselves is to think about the questions we ask and framing them properly. Now, it doesn't have to be so serious. It's something we do every single day when we tell jokes. In fact, jokes are funny because they change the frame in the middle. Does that make sense? Let me give you an example. Anyone know the Pink Panther? Okay, in the Pink Panther, in the Return of the Pink Panther movie, there's a scene where Inspector Clouseau walks into a hotel. He goes up to the hotel manager, and there's a little dog on the floor. And what does he say? Does your dog bite? Okay, can you do it in a French accent? Does your dog bite? Okay, and the manager says, no, my dog doesn't bite. He reaches down, what happens? The dog attacks him. He says, what happened? He says, well, that's not my dog. The fact is, that's what happened. I could just stay up here and tell you jokes for the rest of the 20 minutes, because that's the interesting thing about jokes. Even knock-knock jokes, they're funny because the frame switches. Practice this every day, framing and reframing problems. I give these sort of assignments to my students all the time. So let me give you a second way that you can increase your imagination. And that is by connecting and combining things that haven't been combined before. Listen, we don't have to invent everything out of thin air. We can take things from all different places, put them together in really interesting ways. In fact, if you look at most interesting companies out there, I mean, let's pick a random one like Facebook, right? The concept of a Facebook was not new, but putting it online was, and it's grown into obviously an entire sort of industry. Okay, look at any different company, product, and this happens. Putting things together in surprising ways. And in fact, You guys are doing that here right now by bringing people together from different disciplines. I encourage you to talk to each other, learn from each other. Your centers are built that way too, to bring people together from different schools. You're going to connect and combine in really interesting ways. Again, you can practice this with jokes. One of my favorite ways to do this is by looking at the Japanese art of shindogu. Now, what is shindogu? Anyone know what shindogu is? I learned about this recently. It's fabulous. It is the Japanese art of creating useless inventions. They're not useful, and they're not useless. They're sort of in between, and you're not quite sure what they're good for yet. But most of our inventions start that way, is putting things together, coming up with something that you might not know whether it's obvious or not. But for example, these shoes with the little umbrellas. Okay, you know, it's funny, but you say the reason you laugh is because it's actually a really interesting concept. How do we protect our shoes? And maybe there's an interesting solution. Speaking of shoes, here's another shindogu, little dustpans on the shoes. And again, you giggle because there's something in there, there's something interesting. Maybe you can work with it. It seems silly on the surface, but you keep looking down the path, and there might be something there. Again, you can practice this with humor. The New Yorker cartoon. How many of you read the New Yorker? Okay, when you read the New Yorker, what's the first thing you do when you open the New Yorker? You have to go look at the cartoon contest in the back, right? I submitted one last week. I was so sure I was going to win, but I didn't. Okay, but the fact is, in the New Yorker, they always put in these cartoons things that are non-obvious together, right? The little hobby horse with the businessman, things that are out of scale, things that are out of time. And it's your job to connect them in interesting ways. It's a great way to practice connecting things that are unexpected. So, I bet you want to see the caption for this. Okay, it says, we'll start you out here, then give you more responsibilities as you gain experience. Okay, so the third and final way I'm going to talk about to increase imagination is challenging assumptions. One of the biggest problems people have is that they go with the first right answer to any solution. And I see this all the time. You have a problem, you come up with one answer, and you run with it. Well, what happens is you end up coming up with really incremental solutions. And I really like the concept of the third. You have to get past the first wave of ideas, to the second wave of ideas, onto the third, fourth, fifth, because that's when the really interesting ideas surface. And I do this with my students by giving them challenges that have no right answer, I've never seen before, I have no idea what they're going to come up with, and they usually have to come up with at least 100 solutions before they even pick one that they're going to run with. So here's a very typical design brief, and you don't have to read it. I will just tell you what it says. It says, what did you throw away today? And it says you have 2 hours to create as much value as possible, value measured in any way you want, starting with the contents of a trash can. Now, why did I pick a trash can? I picked a trash can because people actually think of the garbage as negative value, right? You know, you actually pay people to throw it away. So the students had to spend a bunch of time thinking about what was valuable to them and came up with all sorts of things, everything from money, health, community, knowledge, and then they had to do things. And in fact, to raise the bar, I invited my colleagues around the world to have their students do this at the same time. And so we now had, thousands of students around the world taking on this challenge over a few-day period of time. So you want to see what some of them did? Okay, this is a team in Ecuador. They started with a garbage can filled with yard waste. It's not probably the trash can I would have picked, but that was the one they picked. And look what they did. They created a beautiful mural, starting with this. I'll just show you another one so we don't take up too much time. But this is a girl in Ireland. She started with a drawer full of holy socks, her brother's sock drawer. And they were all different colors, black, white, gray, all had holes in them. Probably, again, not the drawer, not the trash can I would have picked. She took them, cut them apart, dyed them, sewed them together, and made this sweater. Pretty cool? So the fact is, you can increase your imagination by reframing problems, connecting, combining ideas, and challenging assumptions. But this isn't enough. You need to start with a base of knowledge. People forget this. Your knowledge is the toolbox for your imagination. If you don't have a base of knowledge to start with, you don't have anything to work with. Consider if you want to come up with a brand new solar car or a new cure for cancer. If you don't know anything about engineering or about biology, you don't have anywhere to start. So we need to have our students have a base of knowledge. Of course, that's what we're all doing in our universities. But you get knowledge in a lot of different ways. Yes, you get it by going to very interesting lectures, or by reading textbooks, or by, just sitting in class. But one of the most powerful ways is paying attention. Most people do not pay attention. And in fact, I spent a lot of time with my students, as well as my colleagues as well, teaching them to look at opportunities that other people didn't see. One of my colleagues at the medical school, his name is Bob Siegel, teaches a class called the Stanford Safari, where the students basically over a 2-week period, it's a sophomore seminar, become naturalists. Now, he normally teaches courses like he takes students to Madagascar, to the Galapagos, to be naturalists. Well, he does it on campus. And they basically, over a 2-week period, look at the entire university with fresh eyes, and they walk away at the end of that time with incredible insights, but amazing appreciation for the power of paying attention. So those are 2 things, imagination and knowledge. But you also need to foster an attitude that allows you to come up with really innovative ideas. The fact is, if you are not motivated, if you're not driven, and you are not confident that you can solve the problem, you will not solve it. Because you know what? It's really hard. It's hard to make breakthroughs, and it's very hard to bring those ideas to life. Unfortunately, most people see themselves as puzzle builders. They basically see themselves sort of like managers. Their job is to take all the pieces and put them together and make the puzzle just like the box top says. But you know what? What happens if you're missing a piece of that puzzle? What happens? Oops, you can't complete the task. True innovators, true entrepreneurs are not puzzle builders. They are quilt makers. They are essentially using all of the resources that they have available to them and leveraging them to do something truly remarkable. Now, let me tell you a story that brings this to life. Some of you might have heard of Peter Diamandis. He runs the X Prize Foundation, and he thinks really big. He's one of these people who's going out trying to mine asteroids, okay? And he walked into a colleague's office, and the colleague had Murphy's Law written on the wall. What is Murphy's Law? It says, if anything can go wrong, it will, okay? Please don't tell me if you have this on your wall, okay? This sort of fatalistic attitude. He walked up. He was so upset that this colleague had Murphy's Law on the wall that he took a big Sharpie, crossed out "it will," and wrote, "fix it." That's what true innovators and entrepreneurs do. They have an attitude that no matter what happens, you are going to fix the problem. So this is now the internal combustion engine for your innovation engine, okay, for your creativity. Your knowledge is a toolbox for your imagination. Your imagination is the catalyst for the transformation of that knowledge into new ideas. And your attitude is a spark that gets the whole thing going. Does that make sense? Great. So essentially, think about it. This is your knowledge, your skills, and your attitude. This is stuff that educators talk about all the time. This is your internal combustion engine for innovation. But it doesn't work unless you have the outside of the innovation engine. It's the reason why so many people who are so creative are stuck in environments where they feel completely stultified. So let's start looking about the outside. Let's start with habitat. Your habitat is all the things in your local environment, the people you work with, the rules, the rewards, the incentives. But even more important, or just as important, is a physical space. The space tells a story, and when you walk into the space, it tells you how to feel, how to think, how to act. Let me give you an example. When you're in kindergarten, you're in a room that typically looks like this, right? Lots of colors, lots of manipulatives, lots of flexibility, lots of stimulating things. Could you be imaginative, creative in this type of environment? Yes, great. Then you graduate from this environment where you're so creative and you get to go to school here. Great. The chairs are lined up in rows and column. They're bolted to the floor. You probably are taking a multiple choice exam with a number 2 pencil. And if you talk to anyone, what happens? You're in trouble. I spent my life in school writing silence is golden, okay? Because this is the type of environment where you're not supposed to talk to anyone. I always think it's very fascinating that kids get in trouble for working together where how many of you, all of you, are being paid a lot of money to work together, right? You're being encouraged to work together, to share whatever you know. And yet we teach students in school to be individual contributors, and we don't give them as many opportunities to work on collaborative teams. So we really need to think about that. But unfortunately, a lot of people grow up out of this environment if they're very successful, and they go work here. And then in these organizations, you know, the people who run them say, you know, it's really terrible. Our employees are just not very creative. And they get really upset, and then they basically take them all sorts of off-sites to teach them to be creative, and then they take them back to this space. Okay? I mean, you see it all the time. So the fact is, space matters. And I'm fortunate enough to teach in classes at Stanford where we understand this. Here's some pictures from one of the rooms at the D School. The furniture is all flexible. It's all on wheels. Everything can be set and reset 20 times in one class. Nothing is precious. You could spill on it. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see these chairs. The students have written their names all over it. It's designed for very flexible collaboration. Here are actually some pictures from my classroom. It looks more like a kindergarten. The students have Play-Doh and markers. They're actually working on a very sophisticated assignment, as well as these students here who are doing a simulation game, and they're actually on the floor. The fact is, we really need to rethink space. We also, though, have to think about the resources we have. Now, we're all here because of the generosity of NSF, and we're really, very, very fortunate to have financial resources. But financial resources are just the starting point, because we have so many resources around us that we don't even pay attention to. Of course, there are natural resources, there are processes that are in place, but there's the community, the people around us. One of, I can tell you so many stories of being places where you talk to other colleagues in other parts of the world where they don't even see the resources that they have. And, I don't even know which story I want to tell you now. I was up in northern Chile, and it was absolutely beautiful. How many of you have been to Chile? A few of you? Okay, Chile's about this wide. Okay, and on one side is a 3,000-mile coast, 3,000-mile beach, and on the other side are the Andes. And it's spectacular. And I was up in northern Chile, and I said to one of the gentlemen in this workshop, well, what's getting in the way of your success? And he said, well, our terrible environment. You know, I looked out the window, it was absolutely spectacular, and he didn't even see it. Okay, this happens all the time. People only want to try to replicate what they think is successful somewhere else, as opposed to leveraging what they have for them. The final piece of the engine is culture. Culture is very multifaceted, and again, it affects and infuses everything we do. One of the most powerful things we can do in cultures that stimulate innovation is an attitude towards experimentation. An attitude that you want to try a lot of things and keep what works. They want to do rapid prototyping. Now, you guys do rapid prototyping, do quick experiments? I hope so. Let me give you an example. At the design firm IDEO, they do a lot of prototyping. And they were interested in creating a game, an iPhone game for kids. And it was called Monster Maker. And they wanted to do a quick test that didn't take very much time or money or resources to see if it might work. I'm going to show you the video. It's just a short video of the prototype they created. And I want you to tell me how much time this took, how much money it took, how much engineering power it took, and how effective it is. Let's see if our audio works.
Cue music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, and he gives me a special dance move. I go and touch again, and he does a different one. And it can go for as long as I want. It has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough and I'm done dancing, I push the back button and pauses and the music stops. Monster Maker. Cool. It sounds like
Wow. Okay, so how much time did it take to make that? Yeah, a couple hours maybe. Okay, how much money did it cost? Just about nothing, okay. How much technical expertise? Not much? Okay, like none, okay. And how effective was this? Really great. I was giving a talk, and there were some little girls in the back of the audience, and by the end of this, they had crawled up to the front at the end of my talk. They said, "Where do I download that app?" So they saw this prototype, and they wanted to buy it right away. The fact is, so many of us, and this is really important, feel like we can't show anything to anyone until it looks fully baked, until it looks fully done. But here's a problem. If you spend so much time making something look perfect, you've A, spent a lot of time, B, you've really gotten committed to it, you also have decreased the likelihood you're going to get feedback. When people see things that look like they're done, they look like they're done. They're much less likely to give you their comments and really constructive input. But culture is even broader than this. Even broader. Culture is like the background music of any organization. Think about it. When you watch a movie or even a TV commercial, the music is there to essentially really affect how you feel, how you think, how you act. So I'm going to play you 2 video clips to demonstrate this. It's actually the same video clip twice. Okay? It is a clip, 1 minute long, from a Coca-Cola bottling plant in 1919. Okay? And each time, it's the exact same clip, 2 different types of music. Tell me how you would feel if you were walking into this plant. Okay, kind of fun, like Disneyland, okay? What about this plant? What is in those bottles? What's that? Oh, that took a little while. But it was interesting to find music that would really bring this concept to life. And the fact is, that's the way culture is. You interpret everything differently. In fact, Brad Bird at Pixar said, and I think it's really profound, that in any film they make, there's one thing that affects the budget that is not in the budget, and that is employee morale and culture. When the morale and the culture are great on a team, they get 3 times the deliverables. When the culture is bad, they get half. The thing is, this is an incredibly important part of anything that we do, especially when we want to have a creative product. So here we have the outside of the innovation engine: resources, culture, habitat. And again, these things affect each other. The culture affects the type of resources you see. The type of resources you have affect the type of habitats you build. But let's put the entire innovation engine back together. Here you see them all together, and you might say, okay, this is really interesting, but why did you need this fancy shape? You need it because all of the pieces of this puzzle all affect each other. None of these happens in isolation. Let me give you an example. Imagination and habitat. The habitats we build are the external manifestation of our imagination. If you can't imagine it, you can't build it. And in turn, the habitats we build affect the way we think and affect our imagination, right? We talked about the kindergarten classroom versus the cubicles, right? The habitats affect your imagination. This is true for knowledge and resources too. The more you know, the more resources you can unlock, and the more types of resources you have determines what you know. For example, the more I know about fishing, the more likely I am to catch fish. The more fish there are in my rivers, the more likely I'm not going to know about fishing. Okay, this is true with anything, right? The more I know about venture capital, the more likely I'm going to get funding. The more venture capitals are in my neighborhood, the more likely I know about VC. This is true and much more obvious with attitude and culture. Because of course, the culture is the collective attitudes of all the individuals, and every individual is affected by the culture. So the most powerful thing about the innovation engine is that you can start anywhere to trigger it. You can start as an individual by building your base of knowledge, right? You can start as a student and build your base of knowledge so you now have the tools when you are motivated to solve a problem to really have the tools for your imagination. You can start with the attitude that you want to solve a problem. I want to, come up with clean water for the whole world. And start with that, and that motivates you to get the knowledge, and again, that fuels your imagination. You can start when you run an organization by building habitats that stimulate the imagination of the people you work with. And of course, if you're the government, you can also provide resources that help all of these things happen and to help build more knowledge. The thing is, with our epicenter, we're working on many places of this innovation engine, and we're here to help you spark it in yourselves, in your teams, in your students. We're creating a lot of resources that we're basically giving away. These are resources for students, for faculty, for administrators. And we're creating resources that are both from sort of the bottoms up and the tops down. Let me give you an example. From the bottoms up, we're finding students who are in the universities, all the 350 engineering schools across the country, who have a spark of enthusiasm. And we're basically inviting them to join our Student Ambassadors program and putting them through training so they become student leaders to build all sorts of programs from the ground up at their schools. From the tops down for students, we're creating these MOOCs, these online classes. In fact, I have 40,000 students right now who are taking a crash course on creativity online. And this is a way for us to get students and basically go directly to them with content. Resources for faculty. First of all, we're really motivated to create a community of faculty members who are really motivated and interested in innovation and entrepreneurship. And we've already held 2 conferences related to this. One was our Epicenter retreat we did at Stanford Sierra Camp. It was an unconference format. It was totally amazing. And 10 projects grew out of that conference, and we're now helping to fund those projects to keep them going forward. We really are passionate about finding the schools around the country who are doing interesting things to tell their stories from the students and the faculty perspectives, and then to help scale those up so that other people can learn from them. So I want to invite you. We are just 1 year into our grant, one year and a few months, and so we're still at the beginning. We're learning a lot, and we're certainly eager to work with you and to help you. I want to tell you 2 things that you can write down. One is our website, epicenter.stanford.edu, and there you will find all sorts of tools, resources, events, and stories from people all over the country who are sharing the things that they're doing at their schools. But Leticia Britos, who is our associate director, the day before I left said, "Tina, please tell everyone in this room to contact her." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, I want to hear from every single one of the ERCs, because by allowing us to help you, you're helping us reach our goals." So thank you very, very much. Do we have time for a few questions?
Yes, we have about 10 minutes or so.
Brilliant. On time, on budget. Great. Tom, we'll see if you want to come up for questions. So any questions, comments, concerns, ideas? Yes, back there. I think they're going to bring you a microphone.
You may not need
He might not, but that was a beautiful voice.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Some people say that creativity is genetic, it's part of our wiring, and we hear it all the time. You cannot teach creativity. What do you say to that?
I always get asked that question, and I have an answer. Okay? People ask this about entrepreneurship. They ask it about creativity all the time. This is a huge mistake. Can you teach math? Can you teach math?
Yes.
Okay. Can you teach history?
Yes.
Can you teach sports? Can you teach writing? Well, of course there's some people who are natural athletes, and there's some people who are natural musicians, and some people who are really skilled at, anything. But that doesn't mean we don't teach everyone math and science and history. I mean, the fact is creativity is the same way. Yes, there's some people who are naturally really, really creative, but all of us can get better. And there are a very clear set of skills, of attitudes, of tools that really allow you to unlock your creativity. And I urge you to think back to when anyone was a kid and how creative they were. And the fact is that our education system really beats it out of them. One of the sad things, I'll just tell you a little story. So I'm teaching this online class, and I have 40,000 students. And so they come from all over the world. And this class, there are no grades. They grade each other. So, I can't grade 40,000 assignments, okay? But when someone misses an assignment, they write to me in a panic that they're going to be in trouble. There's just such a fear of not doing the right thing, of getting the wrong answer. And I think that whole process in our education system has so beaten out the flexibility and the creativity. And so we have to infuse it back into them again. So I couldn't disagree anymore. And Tom, do you agree with me? We get asked this question about entrepreneurship. There are a set of skills, knowledge, attitudes that absolutely can be mastered. Any other questions? Yes. Let's see.
Thank you. That was a great talk. I'm really inspired, and especially with our talks coming tomorrow. How do you link this creativity with diversity? What's the link there?
I love that question. How do you link creativity with diversity? One of the most important things when you're brainstorming, for example, and coming up with ideas, is you're limited by the points of view of the people you have in the room. So you really want to have people with different backgrounds, different knowledge, different life experiences, because they're going to bring really different points of view to the table. If you're trying to come up with ideas and all you have is people who came from the same background, who all look alike, who've had the same background, you're going to end up with a very limited set of solutions. So you need to be very, very thoughtful, and diversity absolutely helps that. The more diverse the inputs, the more diverse the outputs. Yes, back there.
I have two combined questions. The other day I was in some undergraduate classes talking about our graduate program, and I had several students come up to me afterwards saying, I don't think I can be creative enough to get a PhD. And I said, you can learn to be creative, but I'd appreciate your answer to that in that context, in the broader context of how do you embed this in classes rather than just have a class on it.
Right, so this is a good point. I remember when I was getting my PhD, you're working at the frontier where there isn't a right answer. And, it takes a lot of, you really have to adjust your attitude, because the way our school system works, beforehand, you're working on problems where there is a right answer. And I think we need to infuse that earlier and earlier and earlier of letting people get to the frontier. I'll give you an example from my own life that was totally pivotal. I'm a neurophysiologist by training, and when I took my first neuroscience class, I was a sophomore in college. And the first assignment, after a very short period of time in the course, the professor said, there's a part of the brain, we don't know what it does, design some experiments to figure out what it might do. This was when I was a sophomore. You had to write it. I didn't have to go to the lab and do it, but I had to go write up we all had to write up. My brain exploded with the opportunity that I was in a position that I could design an experiment to figure out what part of the brain, what that part of the brain did. And I wrote it furiously, and my professor gave it back to me, and it said, Tina, you think like a scientist. That's the moment I became a scientist. When someone told me that I was thinking in a way that allowed me to do that. And I think this is really important. We are in a very powerful position as educators to the messages we give our students, the type of assignments we give them, the type of feedback we give them. Often people are just waiting for a little bit of encouragement. We're all natural scientists, right? Kids are dropping things all the time to see, how far they fall or whether they break, right? They bang things together to see what noises they make. We're natural experimenters, otherwise we wouldn't be walking or talking. Those things all required us to do endless experiments. Okay? And so we need to start infusing that more. Look, yes, it's important to get a base of knowledge. That's one piece of the innovation engine. But we have to spend as much time also thinking about the other things. Think about it. This is something I'm passionate about. We teach kids from the time they're little how to do experiments. In fact, it's funny because one of the people in my office, Angela, has a 4-year-old. And he came into the office on Monday with his dad. They came to visit, and she said, tell Tina what a hypothesis is. And he says, it's a question you can test. He's 4 years old. Okay, so he at 4 years old has been being taught about scientific method, about hypothesis testing. Do you think we're doing an equally effective job teaching people how to invent We teach people how to discover how something works, but we don't teach them how to invent. And we need to have just as much energy put into both of those. Thank you for the question.
What's your experience about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, is how do you teach entrepreneurship? And the thing is, the answer really depends on how deep you want to go. One of the things we're actually working on and are very excited about is creating case studies for engineering classes that teach typical engineering materials such as thermodynamics or mechanics. And the thing is, but it's set in the context of an entrepreneurial setting. So that when you end up doing the case, the students are learning the science and the technology and the engineering, but they're also answering questions and looking at it from an entrepreneurial context. So that's one way in which you can actually infuse it into an existing class. But it depends really so much on the student's interest. Some students are happy to get it just integrated into their own classes, and others want to go deeper and take separate classes. The other thing that's really powerful and very important is extracurricular, co-curricular opportunities. I know that at Stanford, the number of student groups related to entrepreneurship continues to grow. I'm not sure what the situation is at all your schools, but the students, I promise you, are hungry for this. And by giving them just a little bit of encouragement and resources, the students, even in an extracurricular setting, will do amazing things. How's our timing? Are we good? One more question. One more back here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Raj from CSOPs. I had a question. You had that nice joke about the Inspector Clouseau, and you said that it's not being alert. Now, I usually try to think that innovation and creativity comes from trying to have the vision, but the vision doesn't come till you are at 30,000 feet to really see and understand all that is around, but then you zoom down to go narrow in the detail. So I don't know, is that similar to your experience, or?
Yes, so this is the thing about Inspector Clouseau was about framing problems and looking at things from different perspectives. This is really important. Let me give you a civil engineering example, okay? If I asked you, how many civil engineers in the room? Raise your hands. Okay, great. So what is your name? Cara. Okay, you're a civil engineer. Would you go build a bridge for me? Just say yes. Will you build a bridge for me? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Cara, so thank you so much for building that bridge. You'll go off and build a beautiful bridge. Or you could come back to me and say, Tina, why do you need a bridge? Okay, and I'd say, well, I've got to get to the other side of a river. How many ways are there for me to get to the other side of the river beside a bridge? An infinite number, right? I could take a hot air balloon, I could make a tunnel, I could have a boat, I could go swim, I could bicycle around it. Okay, the fact is that was an example where you could go off and just answer the question I asked, or you could come back and ask me why. In fact, you could even keep pushing that. You could say, well, Tina, why do you need to get to the other side of the river? And I might say, well, I go to school on the other side. You might be able to solve that problem without my even going across the river. Okay, so we really do have to think about the questions we ask, and that's really what I was talking about in the joke with, does your dog bite, and also the framing problems is we need to be incredibly thoughtful, and as you point out, you need to do that from up close, from far away, look at it from different perspectives, and in fact, the diversity question plays that too. You need to look at it from different cultural perspectives. I did a workshop just a couple weeks ago with a group of Pacific Islanders, and it was amazing the way that they brought very, very, very different ideas to the table. I was completely surprised. I'd never seen the types of answers to the questions I'd asked before. So really good point. Thank you very much. This was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.